there for 4 years, and I worked for a year in Dallas, Texas, in 1987, 1988, before I went to law school. Before I went to law school, I got a master's in business from Boston University. And it's the important thing is 4 years in Germany, I was what they call a line manager. I had profit and loss responsibility. I also handled millions of dollars worth of inventory. I was also a troubleshooter, so I would be tasked with going out into other facilities and figuring out why they weren't working well. And working well means financially, why they were losing money. And so that gave me a huge amount of experience that most people don't have, because I basically would go 1 week to another to a completely different business, analyze the business, have to come up with a solution, and then tell the powers that be, usually the executive director, yeah, this is what we got to do. And then essentially, because they quickly got that I knew what I was doing, then they would do it, and then they would turn these facilities around. So, so that's where I come from. When I became a lawyer, we had this weird thing in the law where we go look at a bunch of cases and we look at legal concepts and we try to apply them to a particular set of facts. What you realize when you start doing that as a business for a very long period of time, you realize it's a very complex set of factors that you have to consider. It's not just one, right? And one of the things that I learned very early on was that litigation is a horrible thing for a business. It doesn't matter what kind of business you are, it's just not a great thing. And what I did is I started to adopt my business approach, which is business should be about business, right? You should do what you do to make money and not spend time with lawyers, because spending time with lawyers means you're not focusing on the business. And that really has been driving the philosophy of my practice for about the last 20 years, because it works. I get to brag because I have all kinds of women clients now. Why do I like women clients? Because they listen, right? They actually listen to what I tell them. They consider it. If it makes sense to them, they go, I'm going to do that. And then here's the important part. They go do it, right? And the other part is they don't go around picking fights. Almost all of my litigation involves men fighting over money, which is really more about their egos than anything else. Most of the time, almost all the time, when I have a woman client and we get into a litigation, the first instinct is, what can we do to get this thing resolved so I can go back to doing what I am good at, which is business. That's the right attitude. That is a great client. Do I make a lot of money from that client? No. But the client makes a lot of money for itself or for herself, right? Because they get back to business and they get to grow their business. And ultimately, over the long term, they do much better. And so one of the fun things of my practice is when I get to meet somebody who's just starting their business. Because as I spoke with Mike earlier, there are a lot of things that they don't tell you even when you're an executive of a corporation, that you learn when you start running your own business. Things like setting up a corporation, getting insurance in place, right? The right kind of insurance, right? Having contracts that actually make sense and really do regulate the relationships that you have with customers and suppliers and partners and so forth. And then finally, sitting down and thinking about how you want to deal with other people, right? All these other people interact with your business, and if you don't interact positively with them, or at least fairly and kindly, right, you're going to end up in litigation. And that first conversation is usually indicative to me of how the thing's going to go. Because if we can set up this plan, which basically is not anything new, nothing revolutionary, set up this plan for how they're going to run their business, they're probably going to do well. And the nice thing about it is that if they implement it, they do well. And I've been blessed over the 30 years I've been doing this. I think I have over 1,200 clients that I've set up and started out, and they've done really well. So that's a really, really satisfying part of my business. The unsatisfying part of my business is litigation, because litigation is about fighting. And usually when you're in litigation, you end up with an attorney who loves to fight. And fighting with other attorneys, never a good time, I can tell you that. What's the most satisfying part of litigation for me is when we get into a mediation. We sit down with a retired judge. The retired judge basically tells everybody the weak side of their case, tries to drive them towards a settlement, and we get a settlement. How many people walk out of a mediation at the end of the day, when there's a signed agreement, happy? No one.
No one.
Why? Because they've given up stuff to get to this resolution. And that doesn't make them happy. But a year later, when you talk to them and you ask them, how's it been since we did that deal? And you walked away from that litigation, and they almost always say, it's been awesome. Best thing I ever did, best decision I ever made. Because if I'd still be in that litigation, I'd probably be buried with stress, extra expense, all kinds of distractions that I don't need, right? They don't have that. So they usually do really well in the year after they do these deals. And for me, that's very satisfying. Do I make any money off that? No, but it's satisfying because you actually do something that matters. And you see, we go through life thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the most important thing in the world. I'm the person that's going to make the difference. Frequently you don't. But in these little moments, these little windows of time, right, if you can see that, oh, I might have made some difference, that's kind of satisfying. And that's kind of what I do. I look for those opportunities, and I look for them for my clients, and hopefully I can keep doing it for a while before it all comes to an end. Questions, objections, protests?
Protests. I had a question.
Yeah.
It was something that you had said a few weeks ago when you showboated. It had to do with workers' compensation.
Yes.
So we have workers' compensation for our employees, and the owners are excluded.
Yep.
But we also have our salespeople are really 1099 because they don't come in the office.
Yes.
So they have their own thing. So do we need to be covered? There was a little confusion about, do we need another kind of policy?
No. Usually when I do startups or people are just setting up, they don't think they need workers' comp because usually they're the only people that are in the business.
Right.
And then they say, well, I'm going to hire all these 1099 sales reps or something, right? And then they don't think about the fact that, well, maybe this person could turn on me, right? Could basically get injured and then turn around and say, I'm actually an employee of this company. So you are already taken care of because you have an owner's excluded policy. So you'll have an insurance company who will appoint counsel who will come in and defend you and the company from this claim, like from a sales rep who says, I'm an employee, right?
Yes.
But if you don't have that in place, right, and this usually occurs when it's very early on in the company's life, that you might be in 1 or 2 years, and then you'll have somebody say, well, I'm an independent contractor and I got hurt, and so I'm making a workers' comp claim against this company. And if you don't have any policy at all, you end up, one, having to hire your own attorney, and two, you're subject to all kinds of penalties and so forth for not having it, right? That's if you lose, right? But here's the thing, you gotta fight like crazy, right, to make sure you don't lose. And nobody can guarantee you that you're not gonna lose.
So clarification, Mark, sorry.
Clarification, sure.
Because this is a discussion Crystal and I are having, do we need a policy? We have, again, clarification, we have workers' comp on our employees.
Yes.
We do not have workers' comp on ourselves as owners.
That's right.
But we don't have any separate policy beyond that.
No, you don't need one.
Okay.
But here's the important part. You have one.
You have one, yes.
You have
Pay
one.
for it.
The reason why I bring this up with people who are starting companies is they don't think about this because they don't think they need one at all. You see, and that's...
So by right of paying for workers' comp on our employees.
Because the benefit of you starting a company of your own, not having any employees and dealing with only 1099 independent contractors is, well, you don't have any employees, right?
Right.
Until, of course, somebody says they are an employee. And the beauty of the workers' comp owners excluded policy is that if you basically say, look, we think maybe somebody might one day claim that they're an employee, even though they're not, right? And we want to have something in place in case somebody makes that claim. so that we'll have an insurance company defend us, right?
Yeah.
We won't have to defend ourselves.
So that element is embedded in our.
That's
workers'
embedded
comp.
already.
Okay, that's what we needed to know. We thought we maybe needed to buy.
As soon as you say you have an owner's excluded policy, you're good. Yes, John?
Okay.
So, like, I'm not even hiring outside contractors really. Do I still need one? What, as a solo person?
Well, if you don't have anybody who acts for you, right?
Acts for
Somewhere.
me.
Yeah, then you might not need it.
Okay.
But if you have somebody who acts for you, like a rep or a consultant, or somebody or a contractor of any kind, right?
Okay.
Then I would get one. Because it's inexpensive and it's worth it because it costs literally $40,000 or $50,000 to try to defeat one of these claims.
Okay.
And you don't want to put yourself
So
in.
going back to Ron and Crystal's scenario then, the independent contractor people, what you're saying is they already have that policy in place. Do they, when they report the, I guess you have to report by wages,
Yes.
right?
So
So
they-
that independent contractor wages, they're not wages, but they're getting paid.
Mhm.
That gets lumped into that.
Well, for instance, if you have a sales rep that you only pay commission to on something that's purchased, right? Right, so you wouldn't include that as wages because that's basically independent
Commission.
contractor commission,
So
right?
we said 99.
So here's how that works. If you have all your employees and you have yourself and you give them your wages every year and you get a premium, right, that you have to pay. If for some reason the person who claims that they're an employee is somehow successful, right, and becomes an employee and they have to pay the workers' comp, they will add that person to your wages,
I
right,
see.
for the next year. But you see, here's the thing. In the meantime, they're going to fight like crazy, right, to make sure that that person is not deemed to be an employee.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, is that you save that expense and you save that risk,
Okay,
right? So why take the risk?
gotcha.
Doesn't, and it's a very small cost compared to the risk that you're exposed to. Does that make sense? Other questions?
When you do audit year over year, your workers' comp gets audited every year, extra payroll.
Right.
And you got, it's not reported correctly.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really a penalty, they just.
Thanks so much,
Yeah,
guys.
good, buddy.
Thank you.